Right? I'm going to turn off my noise reduction stuff because that's going to waste a lot of space on my computer. Let's see here. Moving this. Hello everyone. Welcome to my stream. I'm right now going to be doing some how-to kind of stuff with SFM. I'm working on the rainbow thing, yes, and I'm going to be doing the same thing I did with my old blueberry inflation animation and the one in SFM a while back. So we're going to turn this normal mode. So no focal distance is going to be more than 200. It's going to be 500 focal view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all that off because this and this and even this and this do not cooperate in SFM. So another little thing I love to tell people is that if you're going to be using SFM on a lower end PC, turn off all the progressive reflectment and ambient occlusion, which do not work on PCs that are not capable of doing that. So let's see here. We're gonna do alright. We're gonna do this. There's gonna be a lot of props in this one animation, and I'm right now trying to see if there's anything in chat. I don't know what the deal is. So what I normally do in SFM or any other program is that I normally have to like be sure everything works. Funny enough, the Ponyville map that I'm showing you right now had glitches, had background issues, and also there was a bunch of issues with space that I've been having lately, which I know I've been not wasting my space, but I've been having a lot of problems trying to figure out, well, I'm going to have to redo a lot of stuff. I'm doing a rescan because I have a lot more than these right here. So I will be using props from Rarity. So what we're going to be possibly doing with our idea with this is that we're going to have to choose whether to use the default Rarity, which is the revamp. Now there's different revamp versions of Rarity that I have been getting or use. So the name of the model I'm using right now, the moment's called Revord, and it's not showing on stream because I don't want to show all my models. That's not supposed to be on stream. So I'm right now just trying to do as I can with SFM. So I'm going to check and see if everyone is seeing this. So this entire stream would be kind of Christmas related, kind of, because Charlie Factory was one of my favorite movies of all time when it comes to all the Malapani little things that they do sometimes. So the revamped version of Rarity has many different forms. Now, I would say if you were going to be using for, like, let's say a Charlie Factory version of this, and having, you know, animation that is no sound in it, we're not going to be using any sounds. Because that's kind of what I don't want to do, because I already done in the rainbow animation, which I mute the audio so people cannot be spoiled by it. I take videos that I export audio from and then turn it to MP3 or MP4, then export it into SFM through a kind of a pinned messages that I normally have. I have a pinned list of folders that I used for SFM that a lot of people use. And the problem with using like revamp is a bit different. Like, you might have really good models in revamp, But problems are going to be coming is when the hair and stuff is not correct. I have a hard time looking at models that are older, like older models from 2013, 2015. Like, you can tell that they're smaller and bigger. It's just like, you can use a VN model. So the models that I normally suggest when it comes to doing balloons or anything like that is Revord, Revamp, Vord, and then also VPP, Vord Pony model version 2.1. Now I do have some older VPP models, which that's the name of the underscore that you normally have. So when you have this, my most common suggestion when it comes to animating a full animation in a big space, because I want to put it in Ponyville because there's a lot of space and the map itself doesn't break. Now, the next thing you need to do when you do all this is to undo all the locks. So effects. Now, I like to add stuff, not these. Not those. So, when you do have any of this, if you have stuff that's overlays, now overlays, it's okay. Like, color correction's good because you can color correct everything in SFM. What I normally suggest is just to hold it all the way till you get to the very end of the video. Then you go to your material overlay and then just tell it to like see what you can do with it. Now, honestly, I would say you don't want to really play around with too much of these. Now, engine post effect, and there is HLS, SL grain effect, material overlay of text effect, viewport effect. Now, these are the most common ones I normally use is engine post effect to help out with like post after effect when you get ready to use any of these. It's kind of hard to use that. That is a lot of memory being used. That's probably fine. This thing is not using only 11% of my CPU and RAM, but that's a lot. It's a lot. There's a bunch of stuff happening on someone else's end, so let me be sure. Everything is green, so it shouldn't be terrible. So while we're at it, get my keyboard going. So the next thing we're going to be doing is building a set. Now, building a set in SFM might be easy for some people, but it's a difficult job if you're in a big map. Now, there's a copy-paste format that I would say is kind of, house. It'd be like if you just put house or like any of this stuff in user mod. Now, user mod is what I suggest people to use, because that's kind of like where all your models are and all your insides are and all the other stuff. My favorite thing to tell people is that if you're going to be using any kind of map from anyone, use a map called Ponyville. The name of the map I'm using right now for this entire thing, it's pretty old because it was used by one of the most infamous animators of all time, which is Ed+77. Ed+'s Adventures, or in that wizard guy, whatever you want to call him. I remember a bunch of projects that he did, like prior to this. Like, he doesn't do that, does this anymore. He just simply doesn't do. I would suggest that if people don't really watch his content because it's getting very, very boring. It's just like getting to the point where it's going to get to a point where it gets boring. And there is a bunch of stuff that I collected on SFM. So if I just go under user mod, I can find what I need for all this. Now, let's see here. Boutique. So, Boutique is the name of Rarity's house. Now, I normally have to increase the size of the search, like increase the entire search bar to tell me what is already there. And it's mostly kind of a process when it comes to animating this kind of stuff. It'll be like the moment that you're trying to animate something, it will take a tremendous amount of time just getting it done. Like if I just rescan again, because sometimes trying to find her stuff is like very difficult. Because the best thing I tell people to do is just go through the entire list of Carousel Boutique. And to me, there's a bunch of stuff you have to put on the carousel. It's like you don't want to use a full map. It'd be like the Carousel Boutique is just like a carousel for ponies. It's the fashion stuff, what Rarity has. Her house is different when it comes to like playing around with it. Now we have our house. Now what we're gonna do is that we're gonna just put it on the ground because everything is floating. I tell people don't use graphic. Don't use this while you're doing it. You do this. Then you use your 3, 5, or 5 different mark things to move this house around or move her around, or even use this Carousel Boutique house. Now, I like the idea that you can just simply want to do this. Just simply pull the house down as far as you can on the ground, but if it's too far, just move it up. And then you build stuff. That's the common thing I like about using this. There's a lot of stuff going on in this house. There's a bunch of stuff where the camera has to be. So what I'm going to do is we're going to move a little bit out from this. So since her house is the main objective here, because the reference I'm using is from a video, so I'll be taking that reference that's from this. So we're going to move this into here. Now we're going to go back to default on size. So the next thing we're going to do is put Rarity in her spot because we're mapping everything out as we're going. Now, it would take a couple hours to a couple of minutes for me to like figure out, well, normally it takes hours upon hours upon hours of figuring out where everything has to go because I'm just obsessed with keeping up to where everything should be at. And SFM is a easy program. And some people think it's the hardest program to ever learn. Now, if you watch SFM videos on a consistent basis and understand the different fundamentals of animating, then it's not hard. I know this off the bat when it comes to animating stuff. Now, Carousel Boutique has a bunch of props. Like, we can go on and on and on for hours just building a set. Now, I feel better building a set for background stuff. Now, the most common thing I like to do is to group everything. Characters and props. Now, props are more like just background stuff. Less important things that do not work for animation. They're just small details that work on their own accord. It'd be like, a mirror is a mirror. And a boutique has a bunch of stuff in it that work on its own accord. It'd be like we're going right here. So I normally would say if you have a dresser like this thing that's right here, this is a coat rack hanger To me, it is. To some people, it's not. To me, I want to keep everything close to the ground, because shadows and stuff have to be applied. And the next thing we have to figure out why we're doing this is to figure out where all the lights are coming. The lights are coming from like the very top and the very side. You can at max around 9 camera. I think the max amount of stuff you can put on SM is 21 cameras and over 10 light effects. That's the max you can put on SFM until it starts to break. Now, the next thing we're going to do for SFM is that we're going to put more stuff in. So we already know that we're going to put a mannequin. So the mannequins are like on the mirrors, like, you know, like side mirrors and all the other stuff. Stuff that is not as important as the main character. This is just props to use for background stuff for helping out with displays. Now, the displays for the mannequins, they're ponies. So it's any kind of pony that can wear this. So what I can do here is just put in this little area of the dresser and stuff, like a display, you know, like some of the displays you see at fashion shows and fashion places. Some of them have that. And Rarity does have a lot of mannequins in her own house. Now, the problem with Rarity's house is that the square footage of it's like only fit for a small shop. It's not fit for like events. It's used for more like, you know how like those kind of rich person houses that have like small lobbies and small business inside of its own self. Some people do live in their own business, so they don't have to constantly move around. There are some people in New York, some people in California, some people. It's just like for Equestria, it's kind of different where everything's in a fantasy fictional town in the late 1800s. Because the fancy ponies are from Canterlot, and Canterlot doesn't really have a whole lot of space to move. There's a bunch of ponies that live there, but there's a lot of stuff that is crowded. People are living on top of each other. There's possibly a small village outside of Canterlot that people live at. So for Ponyville is just like a village. It's like a small village with little to nothing besides, you know, small tasks, small things, and ponies to meet. And that just makes it easier for the background stuff to be put together. It'd be like, this is the mirror I'm looking for this part of the animation. So what we're going to do is just move it. We're going to turn it around at an angle like this. And then we do this again. That's a salon. So here's the podium. That's the podium that's right there. Now, the podium I have always think on top of my head. It's only for posing and all this kind of stuff. It's not really used for anything else. It's only used for, let's say, just fashion. Now, there's a lot of muzzle, like the only stuff I will pull up off top of my head for this is just small things. And I use a very weird way of doing this. Like, I don't look everything around. I just know where the animation's going to be at. Like, this little part right here, there's nothing there. It's just a dresser room. There's no way to really at all use it. Now, we can just put baked bones. There's the base and the front. But there's one thing that I will say about animation in general for SFM, is that there will be some task involving moving everything around or just, you know, lock it. Now, locking is somewhat of a great way to keep it in place. So she has a lot of desks, a lot of props for clothes. Now, these kind of props are just used for like simple displays. You don't see it, but I see it. But what I can do right now is, since I'm going to be patient and I'm going to give people a chance to look at what it looks like. This, what it looks like when you're using the search menu. The search menu just has a bunch of stuff like all of this right here. So you got the salon podium. Now that salon podium's on the far part of the wall, where as for this is just a little stick to help it stay in place. And the mirror itself isn't really that much different. So there's a way to reflect characters, like, make them go back and forth. There's a way to do material so it can be reflective. Mirrors in SFM and mirrors in Gary's mod are completely different. SFM, you have to animate everything by hand. There's a cheat format you can do with this. But I don't cheat on that, because why would I want to, just simply cheat my way out of animation instead of doing everything myself? Now, I understand some people want to do that, but at the same time, you don't want to do it all the time, because just cheating in SFM is just like a, how you would say it? It feels very redundant. It feels like when you cheat in animation, all you're doing is giving less attention to certain things. So we're gonna copy and paste this. That is a thing you're gonna learn in SFM all the time. It's copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. Now, copy and pasting is the best way to keep you from spending so much time trying to get animation out too fast. Now, I like it when stuff is at an angle. The camera is at its perfect level. And for ponies are not that they're not that tall. They're just like 4 feet or 3 feet tall, or even 2 feet. The reason why I'm saying that is because this house is possibly only about 6 feet or 8 feet in height. So that door over there is only fit for about 6 feet or 8 hands maybe. I don't know. It might be just depending on which kind of pony comes in. But fun fact, that door doesn't even move. The one thing about SFM you're going to learn is that every prop that you have, this building right here does not have an open-closed door. It has just one door that doesn't open. You just have to make it imagine it. So, right where this little thing is, we can move this out of the way and put the salon, and it's in that wall over there. Because I love building layouts, building setups, and in a lot of ways, this little salon is not really much. It's just, you see there's a lot of stuff that, like, very dark areas, very different textures that are in here. So, light in Equestria, since light in this room comes from this window and that window, and the light in Equestria is kind of weird. Since there's no electricity in a house that's normal, it's mostly just magic. And there's a green partial of that, and I think that green is okay. Because green's a fine color for, like, a top roof. So, the next thing we're going to do is keep adding and adding and adding onto this. Now, the next thing we already did stage. Now, we're going to put a board. Now, this board is not really necessarily for the animation. It's just for, like I said, props. There's a bunch of props you have to use, and you have to imagine where everything is. Normally, for a prop like this, she will have it on the far right or right of her entire room. Now, why I'm saying that is because normally in the show, her house is not that big. Same thing with all the props. None of them are not that big. They're just background stuff. Some stuff is used for like just decorative. The decorations I'm putting in this set is not bad. It's not bad at all. The decorative part about this is that I can see everything where it's at, and I don't have to constantly worry about moving everything around again. So, possibility of the stage is about 6 feet. Close to 6 feet if you were to take that off. The most common thing I see in Rarity Shop is very different. Because I can go online right now and look at a house layout. So what is a house layout? Now this is just to help me out with, oh, I misspelled the house part. So this helps me out understanding where everything is in our house. Because there's no second room. In some cases, her house does have a second room in the show. So, everything in the show itself has this. So, let's look at this right here. This is just a sample of what her room looks like on the down floor. So, we have this room right here. This is to help me out with seeing where everything's at, where all the stuff is located, and where does everything in SFM have to be put at. So, I was right, kind of. This right here is her entire room. So, there's light coming from this, light coming from that. So, there's light coming from the room, but it's different. It's just, it's a layout. So, I'm building this set the way I think it should look. Now, the curtains are not really in Equestria. Like, there's curtains for stuff. And there's all this other stuff that is in the house itself. That help out with other stuff. And these are just characters, don't worry about it. I'm just playing around with the overhaul stuff. Now, my layout for SFM is kind of different than most. I built a set and did all that. There's a lot of stuff in SFM that you don't ever see. And that's fine. It'd be like, I like SFM as it is. I like SFM how it looks, how it represents itself, and how on earth it works. So, I do look at everything that I see in SFM. SFM has some pretty interesting ways of keeping everything the way it is. And since we got most of what we need for SFM, now the next part of SFM you need to learn is knowing where everything in SFM is at. So we're going to take the camera and we're going to turn all the lights off. And we're going to take this entire part of here and we're going to take this and that and that and make a thing. So what we have here is just a way of helping out with shadows and all the stuff you need in SFM to really master the format of animating. The whole room itself has light on both sides. So the light in this, if we were to look at it, is to really look at the SFM stuff. We gotta really just be careful with how it looks. Radius, I suggest turning off. Vertical, horizontal, near, edge, and far are all good to help out with all this. Now, this down here is to help out with coloration and where everything's at. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to copy this light and we're going to move it again. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the light on the side. We're going to take a 3-point shot. We're going to take a full shot going this way of light. And we're going to keep moving it back. Because like I said, in the animation world, you got to know where light comes from. So this is what the light looks like coming from behind. That's the kind of light I want at front and back. Now there is top light. Now I try my best to look at light in a way where you can take it as it is, you can take it how it looks, but the one thing I try my best at is to see if the light's going to work. I turn off all the lights in SFM, like turn all the lights on a progressive thing. So it'll be like you have progressive element. So what happens when you put all this stuff right here? Ambient occlusion. But this stuff you don't really need, because once it renders into a full animation that's about a minute long, you won't need that. You will just not use it. Now let's go to our next light. Going this way. Now, I wouldn't say this is like the best way where light should go. I should say that light should go the way where you think it goes. And we're going to look up and we're going to measure where the light's coming from. So the light is coming from this way also. And we're going to move the light back to where it needs to be at. And you got the 3-point format. But there's a bunch of more stuff you have to do. And that kind of stuff comes from where everything should be. There is a light coming from this way, and there is light in here that's coming from that. Now, some stuff is floating. Looks like it's floating in midair, right? See, this thing right here is still floating. So what we're going to do with how we did this, we're going to move it again. And we're going to move her a bit lower to the ground. Now we're going to go back to our camera and move up. Now the reason why you're seeing a bunch of problems with the material and you see a lot of blocky stuff is because there's a bunch of bumping you have to do. Now there's a bunch of light that has to be manipulated. Now, we got the 3-point format, and then we got our last one, which is on the roof. So the next light, we're going to do light 1 again, and we're going to copy that one, and we're going to go 1. And we're going to take this light again, and we're going to go up. We're going to go down with it. If this stuff is already what you know, and you already know how it works, then you should already know where light should come from when it's from the top. Because the light that's coming from off of here is really bright, and there has to be a lot of light coming. Then you would look at this again, and you'd be sure how much light is coming from every direction. And that should be all your light that you should be able to use. So you have light coming from every direction now. The next thing we need to do is fix some of the light rotation. Or in other words, we got to fix a bunch of shadows that are coming from this. And you see that there is a bunch of little zigzag outlines because the model itself, there's a lot of process coming out of these. So the shadows come from this way. So shadows in SFM get harder because there's a lot of blocky output. To really get that away, you have to look in a position where you take the light that's already there, that's too bright. Now, my best suggestion when it comes to this kind of stuff, so when it gets to a point where light does tend to get haptic, I would suggest just simply playing around with it. I don't play around with a lot of this because there's no noise in it, so you don't really need noise to really help you. But she still is floating in midair. So now, since she's not floating in midair anymore, let's figure out what to do with the light being this way. Oh, that's right, you gotta have light coming from the front. Now, in a lot of ways, I try to keep the light coming from all directions. Because you don't want light coming from one direction, that's all you do. That's not how animation works. Now, where on earth is that light? Oh, it's coming from here. So there is light coming from a bit closer. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. And we're going to look at that. Now there's a bunch of light that's coming from the front. And you need some light coming from the front and some coming from the back. And there's a bunch of light coming from this. So that's most of your lights that you need. You only need about a max 5 or 6, maybe 7 or 8 lights coming from one thing. A full animated movie has over a million lights being put on. For a room like this, we don't need a lot of light. We just need a few lights in one spot. Now, let's look at this one. So where on earth is this coming from? Ah, so the light is coming from this way, and I figured out something. Why on earth that happened? And there is no dark shadows anymore. Now, the shadows on mirrors, so you're trying to figure out where does all the light coming from. So, I'm thinking that all the light is coming from all directions. So, we do this again with frontal. And the next thing you need to do with animating an SFM poster or any kind of GIF is how dark do you want it? Because the most common thing I love to use in SFM is dark backgrounds, dark lights, and very colorful lights in some sense. The next thing you can do is possibility put some color onto the character. And I would say try to do it, try to animate some stuff, but there is a thing where you can animate this thing, but the problem you're going to get is that there are going to be issues with shadows. Now, shadows shouldn't be hard to deal with. Like I said, there's a bunch of stuff that goes into shadows. So I try to tell myself there shouldn't be shadows on a character, and there shouldn't be shadows coming from a certain distance. The shadows is supposed to help out with seeing where the character's at, where the light's come from, and I told you the lights come from all directions because there's invisible light that comes from the ceiling, there's invisible light that comes from the windows. Just a lot. And the next thing you can do with light is maybe add some particles. Yeah, that's not going to happen. So another thing too is right now we can just go back to this and group it. Props. And this helps out with shortening up everything in the background. And the big two main ones is the building itself and all the props are used in the background. This is supposed to help out with all your other background stuff. And the next thing we can do with keeping all that to a point where it doesn't do that, you can do this. And you don't have to deal with all that pesky kind of stuff. And knowing where everything's at, and knowing where all the camera stuff. So the next thing I can do right now is move it. And the next thing we can do is take rarity to a point where we can add baked bones and we can add our overlay materials. Now you go to your model in Anime Set Editor, go to body and add color. You can add color by using the hashtag #CastShineColor. Now the next thing we're going to do, and sorry for it to be like this way, there's just a lot of stuff going on in this. So the next thing we can do is put color on a different format. The reason why I did that is to show you don't ever do that. You don't ever, do that in color. Or you can just do that. We can redo this again, add overlay materials. The next thing we can do is add color to the character's body skin. And changing color of a model is pretty funny at times. Now, the most funny thing I love to do with doing this is just turn it to blue. And we can change this. And then we can just add attribute. Yes. Love you too. Whatever. Hang on. Weird. I'm going to come back in a little bit and fix that.